the future will know about our times through our eyes. And I've always felt like that was a good reason to take care of my work. May not be the greatest, but I'm taking good care of it. So who knows what will happen.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Foundation, in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
So a lot of us have been thinking about Jimmy Carter recently, since the former president died a little while ago. I was actually watching ESPN when the news broke, and in true ESPN fashion, they were running the scores on the screen, and then the bulletin came up that said that President Carter had died, and of course the detail it mentioned he was a lifelong Atlanta Braves fan. And then in true Mitch fashion, I sat there thinking, hey, they were the Boston Braves until Carter was like 30, and then they were the Milwaukee Braves for another 12 years after that. You know, I was born in Boston. I lived in Milwaukee for 14 years. Don't try to get that stuff past me. But that gets us off topic. I lived in the D.C. area when Jimmy Carter was president. One of his kids, in fact, Chip Carter, was in one of the poli-sci classes that my dad taught at George Washington University, and that meant so was a Secret Service agent. Later, my dad moved on to an organization that was located next door to the Canadian Embassy, and that was kind of a big deal too, because if you've ever seen the movie Argo, you might remember the role the Canadians played in helping the U.S. during the Iran hostage crisis, and the windows in my dad's office building that faced the Canadian Embassy were filled with signs that spelled out, "Thanks, Canada." Anyway, I bring this up because we did an interview a few years ago about President Jimmy Carter's one overnight in Kingston, Ontario. And then more recently, we did an interview with Lake Placid native Nathan Farb about his groundbreaking photography trip to Siberia during a détente in the Cold War, and the portraits that resulted. Why do I bring both of these things up? Because for this edition of Northwards, we're revisiting Jimmy Carter and we're revisiting Nathan Farb, but both in a different context, given Carter's recent death at the age of 100. So cast your mind back. Pretend this is the end of 1976. Jimmy Carter is back in his hometown of Plains, Georgia, during the transition between his election and the inauguration that was coming along in January. Okay, I was not there, but I think I can make a strong case that this was a pretty big deal for Plains, Georgia, as political luminaries and the national media and tourists and others descended on a village that is about the size of Brazier Falls or Elizabethtown, or name your North Country community of about 700 people. One of the others was Nathan Farb, who was living in New York City and recognized something unique was happening a few hundred miles to the south. He spent more than a week in Plains documenting this small but significant chapter of history, and the results were published in a magazine called Camera 35 in the spring of 1977. Farb unearthed the photos from his vast archives in the days after Carter's death and shared them with us and the rest of the world, and so we reached him by phone from his home in Jay to get more of the story, starting with why he went to Plains in the first place.
I wanted to witness history for myself, period. I wanted to witness history for myself. And I did not have a camera when I saw Martin Luther King deliver the "I Have a Dream" speech, and I think one of my takeaways from hearing him was that it was in August and in January I bought my first camera. It was one of those things that was pushing me toward that. But I just wanted to be a witness to history and what was actually going to happen. Look, I grew up. My first 5 years were Oklahoma, Arkansas. Arkansas was a very southern state, so I saw that incredible divide, racial divide, and so I was very aware of that, and I was really curious. He was a modern Southerner. He He sounded really good, and so I was really curious of what he was like and what I would find there. What interestingly I found is that all kinds of people, you see probably the picture of George Bush, and you see the picture of Kissinger, and many other people trotted down there to meet him. And you know what everybody was doing? They were looking to hold on to their jobs or get a place in the administration, okay? Most of the people who I saw coming through, including me, I was thinking what this guy really needs is somebody to report on the conditions in America. He doesn't need another photographer to photograph him every day and so forth. And so I was thinking, just a way in the back of my mind that I might be able to pull that off. And then the hotel finally had an opening, got it? And I arrived at the hotel exactly at the same time the guy who invented the MRI did. And we agreed that we could share a room. And he was there to show the MRI to Carter, who, of course, understood something about nuclear energy. And he really thought he had the cure for cancer there. It turned out to be an incredibly important image-making machine, and of course the people who proposed it as the ultimate image-making machine, they got a Nobel right away. And he waited 20 years before he ever got a Nobel. But he was there with his, with his diagrams and everything, and a computer to show Carter. I don't know if he ever got in to do it, but a lot of people were there, and I'm telling you about looking for a job or bringing something to the attention of somebody who claimed to be more in touch with the American public, which for sure he was. The kind of people that were there were all looking, for what would happen or how, I guess that happens to every administration. I don't know.
Well, but Plains seems a little different than Mar-a-Lago.
Well, of course, it's a totally different scene. It was really weird to see what's his name, Kissinger, walk down the street and people screaming, Henry, we love you. Henry, we love you. It was such a jumble of people and ideas and
it's hard to imagine someone who would feel more out of their element than Henry Kissinger in downtown Plains, Georgia.
Absolutely. I was totally shocked. You see the picture of him, right?
Yeah.
People paying homage to Miss Lillian. She just totally sat there and loved it, and his brother, what was his brother's name? I can't remember.
Billy Carter.
Billy was, Billy was being Billy. He was drinking, he already had Billy beer ready, I guess that's what happens when somebody becomes famous or, the president is people flock to be around him. And particularly he who seemed to be so much a person who, from everything I saw and I have heard, he respected everybody.
You're writing kind of in the essay that accompanies these photos. It seems like you had a sense that, like, not only was this a transition to a new presidential administration that was going on, but that the country was kind of changing in front of your eyes in this one small town in Georgia.
I didn't reread what I wrote in the essay. I don't remember what I wrote, but I don't know if I felt that way. I felt like it could, but I felt it was the same old thing.
And you said you didn't reread the essay, but I wanted to quote the last line in it, if I may, because that was the thing that struck me. You wrote, "Time passed and I went home thinking how much I hope our new leadership really sees what troubles people, not only in Plains, Georgia, but in every town in this country." And I mean, I was not that old. I was 8 years old when Jimmy Carter became president. So I don't have a lot of memory of what the country was going through. But still, you just sort of captured this moment of expectation in a way, and it was remarkable to read that line.
Well, I got to tell you, as you read it, I started to have a little tear come to my eye. Because I really didn't, and I felt, oh boy, that was pretty prescient. And I didn't feel that I could write at that point. I don't know how I wrote it. I can't remember. I can remember thinking it, it's pretty much, and I think you're right. It does capture, I stand by it, completely. I mean, I think it does capture that moment each time there's a change. I think right now what's going on is much, much great. I don't want to say greater. There's just so much going on in the world that is extraordinarily painful and scary. And unsettling, very unsettling times we're living in now. I think more. I mean, I think we might have hoped for better, but now we're all being very protective. I think, very scared of what's going to happen, or at least that's the way I feel a lot of the time. I'm an old man now too. That's a very big difference. To be an old man, I have said to some people, also people my age, I've said to them, I feel like an immigrant in my own country. I don't understand what's going on. Wow. 50 years later, it's just amazing, to me that I've taken care of my work. I always felt this may not be the greatest work, but I am taking care of it. I am going to take, I think in the last piece we talked, I told you that I had read, what's her name from Maine, Bernice Abbott. Oh. She said, the future will know about our times through our eyes. And I've always felt like that was a good reason to take care of my work. May not be the greatest, but I'm taking good care of it. So who knows what will happen,
Well, and we're all witness to it because of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Photographer Nathan Farb lives in Jay, New York. He grew up in Lake Placid, in addition to spending his very early life in places like Oklahoma and Arkansas. The photos he took of Plains, Georgia during the transition as Jimmy Carter was about to become president were published in a magazine called Camera 35 back in the spring of 1977. He has shared them with us as well, and you can see some of those photographs at ncpr.org/northwards. That's all for this edition of the program. Ethan Shanty joins us now with a list of all the people who make this show possible.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, edited, and produced by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me, Ethan Shanty. Caitlin Kelly handles our social media, Bill Hanel is our digital director, and Doyle Dean is our production manager. Music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To support this show and find more podcasts, visit ncpr.org. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.